Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to make a land acknowledgement. I'd like to start this meeting by recognizing that the area that we call the Fraser Valley Regional District has been home to Indigenous peoples for generations. There are 31 communities with reserve lands in the FVRD's jurisdiction and as many as 69 groups with interests in the area. The diverse landscape means that there are many different viewpoints that need to be considered when we make decisions, because what we decide as a local government can affect everyone in different ways and now and in the future. So as part of our collective responsibility, I commit that we continually examine the work we do to ensure that our projects, plans, initiatives, and discussion are guided by the principles of inclusion, collaboration, and reconciliation today and in the future. So with that in mind, I'd like to call to order the November 14th, 2024 meeting of the Electoral Area Services Committee. And I guess I'm asked to present a chair's report on the regional and corporate services.
Yes, please.
This morning at the RACS meeting, we had a presentation by Ms. Jessica Regan in regards to the food mesh project. This is our work to combat food waste in the Fraser Valley. Ms. Reagan pointed out that half of the business respondents have changed their behavior as a result of the 2020 bylaw. Board members expressed their gratitude for their work. We moved on to talk about the regional solid waste update. Director Horn pointed out the complexity surrounding the destination of recycled products. And Director Horn suggested that the FBRD advocate the province for better coordination. We then talked about the North of Fraser Transit Service that's being projected. Director Horn was concerned that the transit improvements need to be made not only east of Mission, but also west of Mission. Then we went on to talk about the 2025-2028 Transit Improvement Program Initiative. And Chair Lum pointed out that the FBX program initiative should not mean that local transit needs to suffer less allocation from BC Transit. And that's my report. Any questions or no? I'll turn things over to our CEO.
Thank you. So looking for approval of the agenda and late items.
Motion, Director Adamo, second Director Johnson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
Item 5.1 is a delegation from our friends Scott, Nancy, and Nicole from the Fraser Valley Regional Library.
Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. And I have a short presentation for you today. I'm more than happy to take questions at any time during the presentation, and also at the end, of course, if you prefer. So I'll get started, and I'll try to go quickly in deference to your time, which I'm sure is precious. So I want to talk a little bit about the library and just give you an update as to where we're going and some of the things that are specifically important for FVRD. A very brief agenda for you. I'll talk a little bit about FURL, just some things that you might not know. I always call the theme of today's presentation the invisible library, things that you might not know about your library. We'll talk a little bit about the future and what's coming. And then finally, a couple of budget items that you'll receive much more detail on from FURD staff in the budget cycle. And so moving on, we'll talk a little bit about FTRL and the advantage you have as being a part of what is the largest public library in BC. We enjoy reminding some of our other competitors that we are, in fact, the largest by population served, currently serving approximately estimated 928,000 people in 2025. Out of interest, I would also note that we are also actually technically a regional district, just like FVRD. Incorporated under the Library Act rather than the community charter, but our formal legal name is actually the Fraser Valley Regional Library District, which also explains my title. We are very large. We have 25 different libraries, which of course FVRD residents can use any of those libraries. But in addition, we can also provide access to many other libraries across the BC and the Lower Mainland. I'll talk a bit about that in a moment as well. But currently, we have almost 1 million different physical and digital items in our collection. I definitely wanted to highlight the digital side, which is the part that many people still don't know libraries have. Everybody knows we have books. Many people don't know that we offer ebooks and e-audiobooks for download, which are very popular, especially in the Valley where a large number of people commute and like to listen to e-audiobooks in their car. We also have access to 57 different interlinked libraries, which are all libraries in the Lower Mainland. We're all part of the Library Federation, and you can get access to all of those should you, for example, be commuting to Vancouver or one of the other communities around us. We offer DVDs, which is surprising because DVDs are still very popular. Even now, they're still being produced. People are still not able to get, for example, streaming services if they don't have internet access at home. We still find a very big trade in our DVDs. Here in the Valley, we have for all of our playground items, of course. Radon meters are very popular for obvious reasons. The eastern region in the Fraser Valley had some radon issues. We have had many customers contact us and say, "You've saved my life. We didn't know we had a radon detector, radon problem until we borrowed a meter from the library." So that's an area that we're very proud of. In addition, telescopes here in the East region are very popular because you have relatively dark skies relative to the rest of the valley, which is impressive. Also wanted to highlight our databases. We have 44 different databases available, including LinkedIn Learning, which offers over 6,000 different online courses for very high-level job type related things, and birdwatching backpacks, which are, sorry, pardon me, that's from the playground. Mango Languages, which allows access to over 70 different language learning tools. So very impressive. As I said earlier, when you are borrowing from FERL, you can also borrow from any library in BC. We are part of a provincial program called One Card, which means that with your FERL library card, you can get a library card that gives you access to any library in BC. You can borrow, you can return to any library in BC, and it actually comes back to us. Anything that's borrowed from us that gets left in another library also comes back to us. It's rather impressive. We can get books from not only anywhere in BC, but technically all over the world if we can't find them in BC. So if you need something, we will do our absolute best to get it for you. Another area, again, very popular in the East region are public computers and our Wi-Fi access, because things like home internet access aren't as common in some parts of the of FERD. We have full access to the internet in our facilities. Wi-Fi as well, which for a long time in Boston Bar was some of the only Wi-Fi available. Now it's thankfully getting more spread out, but we have lots available there. This is a really important part for a lot of people. Over 90% of jobs now are only advertised for and applied for online. And if you don't have a computer and your own internet access at home, you're left out of a huge chunk of the job market. So that's an area that it's still very much in high demand. For those people who do have technology devices at home that they might not be as comfortable using, there are a fair number of those. My own parents, for example, we have book librarian services, which allow somebody to come in. They have half an hour to learn technology from one of our staff. And if they are still needing more lessons, they can rebook time again. So very popular service. Library programs. So this is the traditional story time that we have, but also everything like virtual reality, ukulele clubs, book clubs, all of those different areas are our fastest growing service. And that's not just us. Libraries across the country are seeing huge demand for programs, but in particular now in-person programs. During the pandemic, we did a lot of story times through virtual systems, through Zoom. But of course, we found that as we've gotten past the worst days of the pandemic, we are seeing a real demand for people to return to in-library programming, to community programming. It's a very popular area we have. For now at least 10 years. We put on more programs every year. We have more program attendance every year. We've been growing by roughly 5 or 6% every year in terms of programs. So it's a very big area of demand. Many people are valuing that in-person contact again, now that we've gotten past that, the rather rough time of the pandemic. I did want to highlight here that one of the other strange things about a regional library is that there's a traditional metric in libraries that approximately 90% of people will who go to a library live within a 3-mile radius. That is not true in a regional library system. We actually see in our own database, where we can track what people are doing to some extent, that people travel significant distances in the Fraser Valley. We have a commuting culture in this day and age. A lot of people, for example, might live in Boston Bar, commute to Hope for work, or commute even as far as Chilliwack to work. Not surprisingly, they will go to the library that is close to where they work, maybe on their lunch hour, and use the library there. for that matter, they'll also, as we've seen, use libraries even outside of FURL. And again, that's where we get back to that one card, that interlink system that we're a part of, which allows you to use libraries anywhere in the province. So we do see a lot of people using different libraries throughout the area. Common pattern we see is somebody who lives in the Fraser Valley will pick up books at Boston Bar or Yale on their way out to 100 Mile or somewhere else where they might have a cabin. So very interesting behavior patterns, which are different than what we're used to in other areas, in other libraries, where you have more consistent local usage of libraries. One of the other advantages that we see at FURL, and this is becoming more important every year, is that we're a very large library. That means that we have a very large staff, almost 400 people. We are able to get very skilled and specialized staff, which other organizations desperately need. As we move into IT security areas where there's a lot of problems with people's networks being compromised, we are able to get the specialized security staff that, knock on wood, keep us safe. It's a never-ending battle to do that, but other libraries that are smaller don't have the ability to get the kind of specialized staff that they need to run those very complicated services. And of course, as we've talked about regularly, the economies of scale that go with being a part of a large library such as us, where we can get as much as a 30 to 50% discount on books that we order, is huge. And as you can see, the costs speak for themselves. FURD has a much lower cost per capita for library services than the vast majority of libraries in the province. Looking to the future, we're always looking forward. I joke regularly that my job is to live 5 years ahead of me and keep an eye on what's coming in the future. We are about to release our new strategic plan. And I say new, it's actually an updated and refreshed strategic plan called Opening Minds and Enabling Dreams. Our board has just approved the final plan. We are right now working on getting it published and getting it ready to go for an official launch in January. It will include mostly the same 5 themes that we've had in the past, but with an extra emphasis on welcoming place, which we are, as I said, we're seeing an increased demand for people who really want to be in the library, in that program space with people. So that's something you'll see very much emphasized in January when we formally publish the actual plan. Last but not least, or almost last but not least, I did want to highlight that, of course, Boston Bar Library, you'll hear through FURD staff that there's a budget proposal in place to use money fully funded from FURD reserves with the library, which has been gathered for many years, to do a major renovation at the Boston Bar Library to replace and repair end-of-life shelving and flooring, which are both in the ballpark of, we estimate, 25 years old. So they're starting to have some significant problems, need to be replaced, but we have budgeted for that through reserves. And then finally, there's also a proposal that you'll see in the budget process for a library promotional mail out. As I said, we often see ourselves as the invisible library for all the services people don't know we do. So we're working on trying to get some of those things more publicized to people in FURD so that people are aware of the services that they can access through the library, which they might not know about. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope it's been helpful. I'm happy to take any questions now or in the future if you think of them afterwards.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Director Adam.
Thanks very much for your presentation. And just no question, really. I just think you guys do an absolutely fantastic job. I have my library card. On the weekend, I was there and in Hope Library, and a little child was there with his mom getting her first card. And that's their first touch of something like that for a small child to join a library. It's their first ID card. And it was so exciting. And I stayed in the library that day for like 20 minutes, just watching this kid kind of run up and down and look at the book and then learn how to use the computer and learn how to do this. And it was really quite something. And they've done a wonderful job there with that program. So thanks very much. And keep up the good work. We'll continue to support it.
Thanks so much.
Good. Thank you, Director Adamo. Director Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for your presentation. Just a question of curiosity. So the Boston Bar Library is housed in the Boston Bar School and is used not just by the public, but the students, on a regular basis. So I'm just curious why the school district isn't paying for the needed upgrades. Wouldn't that be part of maintenance?
I would have to put that to FTRD staff, I think, because we don't look after the facility in general. I know that, but I will say that there's a pretty big division between school libraries and public libraries, for example. They're funded differently. They're under different ministries of the government. So we do tend to keep fairly separate. Our mandates are quite different. So, but I would have to, I think, look to FTRD staff for that question.
Through the chair to Director Johnson, if you'd like, we can take that back and look into what those arrangements are between the school district and, their lease arrangement. I suspect that it has something to do with that.
Okay, thank you. I'm just curious.
Good. Thank you, Director Johnson. Director Dixon.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. A little bit of a refresher as I'm on the library board, but I just wanted to comment that I do think that the Fraser Valley Regional Library is doing amazing work. I'm in the library a lot and with my grandkids, and there are all kinds of programming. One of them that I recently was part of was Wiggle Time, and just a great chance for little ones under 5 to socialize, we were making owls that day, but just to be part of something, because not everybody's in a preschool or things like that. And I think that's just huge value to having children and an adult with them, learning those kind of things and being part of the library just to see what else, because after that, of course, we had to go and pick out great books and things like that. So there's a lot of good work, and I'm just happy to see that we're continuing to reach out and to try to get more and more people aware. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Dixon. Yeah, thank you, Scott. I think some people would say our civilization is built on a foundation of books, and what could be more important than having good access to a public library system? So we sure thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you so much.
And come back and see us again soon.
Will do, for sure. Thank you very much.
Good Simon. And the robots.
Ms. Kinnaman.
So moving to item 6.1, we have the draft Electoral Area Services Committee meeting minutes of October the 10th, 2024.
For a motion, move Director Johnson, second Director Dixon. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
7.1 is the FDRD public notice policy and adoption of public notice bylaw.
Move Director Castle, second Director Adamo. Any discussion? Director Castle.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. Through you to staff. Just so each electoral area has a different kind of options for getting these messages out. And the report talks about working with communication staff to determine in each case. Do you foresee consultation with the director on a case-by-case basis to say where should we be getting this out to the public?
Thank you. Through the chair to Director Castle. So in the policy, there's a number of criteria that would be used to determine where any additional above and beyond public notice would be, and that would be input with the electoral area director, any financial implications, community interest, and the actual topic for which additional public notice is being given.
Thank you, Director Castle. Director Davidson.
Right. So in a similar vein, I guess I'm looking at the staff report and the public notice policy, noting that the tone of it seems to be that staff will consult and consider various factors, including electoral area director input. I wasn't quite clear on where to what Ms. Van Ness just referred to as actually living. I'm not sure if I'm missing something. The question that came to my mind is, should the electoral area director essentially not agree with staff's approach? What happens next? What would happen next, or what could happen next? What's the process?
Thank you. Through the chair to Director Davidson. So the policy as written has staff making that determination, but considering electoral area director input, as well as a number of other factors. And I think what's important is to remember that this is additional above and beyond advanced public notice. So this would be on top of advertising on the FERD website and on top of advertising through the FERD's official Facebook page.
And if I can just further
Sure.
add, I think one of the big considerations, Director Davidson, is budget. So in many instances, previously, the requirement to advertise in a newspaper for 2 consecutive cycles really could become quite costly for something that perhaps not very many eyes were falling on that notice in the local paper. And in some electoral areas, there may not even be a local paper that's routinely delivered in those communities. And so in the event that an electoral area director wanted to go above and beyond and it was against the staff recommendation, if the electoral area director has budget available for that, then we would be able to accommodate it.
What budget are we referring to that an electrical area director would have access to for something like this? I'm trying to understand that one. For example, a zoning amendment, it's all one budget for all costs. So if staff came to conclusion that the default, call it, which, you know, FERD website, if an electoral area director said, no, we got to do more, staff said, no, don't want to, there's no money, what's the drill? I guess I'm trying to, where I'm coming from in this is we're crossing into a new time when, instead of being required to publish in local newspapers, that requirement's gone, which in my mind is a good thing. But it also creates this sort of uncertainty as to what is appropriate and who makes that call. And when you're getting into that kind of discussion, there's the potential for we simply don't agree. And I'm just trying to unpack what that would look like going forward. If we're just, staff thinks it should go one way, the electoral area director thinks, no, it's not enough. Going back to the bare minimum that's in the bylaw is really just that. It's the bare minimum in the bylaw is not impactful in any way. Like, public don't monitor our website, they just don't. So I'm just trying to understand how we're going to procedurally resolve disagreements as to what level of communication is appropriate.
Through the chair to Director Davidson, I guess I was thinking in terms of budget in a situation where there might be a desire by an elected official to explore service area establishment through a feasibility study. And there might be funds that are being used through that budget, that there would be a discussion of incorporating those funds towards expanded notification. In the instance that you're describing, like any disagreement at the staff level between the electoral area director and the staff, we would bring issues that are of a budgetary nature that affect the entire committee that would be brought to the committee table for consideration.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Davidson. Director Wardenberg.
Yeah, thank you. I guess through the chair to staff, I guess on the same lines as Director Davidson, except for it's about disagreements between electoral areas as far as where would you advertise if one wanted like an overlapping area, like a Facebook page or something, and one area director wanted the advertising to go into that area, which kind of overlaps into another area, and the other area director did not want to do that or wasn't informed of it. So in that kind of scenario, how would you go about that? There's a lot of overlapping, especially in a couple of areas of the Fraser Valley Regional District when it comes to the Facebook pages. And that would be a concern of mine for sure.
Through the chair to Director Wardenberg, I guess I would suggest that there's an unlimited number of hypothetical situations that we could propose here today, and we navigate all of these situations as they come up.
Yep.
Thank you, Director Wardenberg. Director Dixon. Okay, Director McMahonic. Sorry about
I didn't know who was first or second. So anyway, thank you. And my question is, just from my limited experience, that people don't generally go look at the website or the Facebook so much. And so I would really appreciate if it had something to do on a regional basis or in an electoral basis that affected the residents in my electoral area. Actually, we see, and I'm having issues with the Facebook, but things like that happen, to actually receiving a link or a link to the Facebook and a link to the website with the actual information that you're trying to get out so that we can distribute as we see fit. But that would be really appreciated, because just sometimes I find people aren't getting it maybe as quickly, and even myself, sometimes I'm busy and then I go in and look, and I should, and that's on me. I need to be more, but links would be really appreciated by myself, and I'm pretty sure that the other directors would feel the same. And then it's in the ball's in our court on to do with as we would like. So regional or electoral, but I would really appreciate that and find that would be really helpful. So thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director McAhonick, and I apologize for not seeing you later. Director Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Director McAhonick. It would be super helpful for me to have a link on things that are going out. I have my own distribution lists and can easily forward that as well as the Facebook. All of these are fine with me. I noticed when I look on the agenda that it's got newspaper advertising in the progress. I haven't seen progress delivered up in my area for a long time, so I think I'm probably just like the other areas as well, where the rural don't get it anymore. And this little chart that I'm guessing is draft, since it says that across it. Mine doesn't have a direct mail out, and there are times where that's a place for that. And maybe I said no at some point along the way, but I think it makes sense to have it on the list, and maybe at some point it's something we'll want to do. So thanks for your work on this.
Good.
Certainly staff can update that list before the November's board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you, Director Dixon. There appears to be a fair amount of angst amongst the electoral area directors about this new system. As I understand it, the bylaw requires that the notice be given on the FERD webpage and the FERD Facebook page. And I think the concern is that maybe that doesn't cover off many of the members of our community.
That is correct. So the bylaw as written would require the public notice to be given on our FERD website and the FERD's official Facebook page, which is open. It's not a group. That's something that's open to the community. And perhaps we could have Ms. Piper speak on terms of membership with that with our Facebook page.
Thank you. Our membership is the greatest with Facebook compared to all of our other social media outlets or platforms. But I think we would want to go where our audience already is sitting, and that is obvious through our numbers. With Facebook, we're over 6,100 followers, and it goes down from there if we look at Instagram, Twitter, X, and so I think it's best tactic to lean on where our peoples are currently sitting is in Facebook. Just a thought to help with promotion, perhaps we could do a bit of marketing of the change if it does go ahead, and promote that this is the new way of us doing public notices, and showcase where it would be located on our website, as well as how it will be shared on social media. Another additional tactic that we could use to promote is boost the original post, which may reach other audiences that don't know yet that they want to be followers of our Facebook page. So that may assist as well. And compared to what the costs currently are with newspaper ads, that may be more of an economical choice for directors to consider.
So as I understand it, there's 6,100 people on this Facebook page and there's 300,000 people in the FERD. Is that right? Yeah. So I am so illiterate when it comes to these social media, but in my community, what people are looking at is the local Facebook page. And it would, if there was some kind of a way of getting advertisements out to them, that would really be well understood. I worry that these FERD sites that aren't very frequented by most people.
Mr. Chair, if I can just comment, I think that both Directors Makahonic and Directors Dixon mentioned the desire for a link. And so I think that the way forward on something like that would be to provide those links to the electoral area directors who know their communities best and can go on those bulletin boards, those Facebook pages that exist within community, and share that information that way. It would be rather difficult for staff to go to all of the different Facebook pages that are out there in the Fraser Valley to individually post and target those pages, particularly when some of those groups aren't public. So they're not necessarily, you have to be a member of the group. And often the neighborhood groups restrict your access if you are not a resident of the area.
Okay, good. Thank you. Any further discussion on this? Hearing none, all those in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
8.1 is a 2024 grant and aid request for the Cultus Lake Park Community Events and Engagement Committee in Electoral Area H.
Motion moved, Director Dixon, second Director Makahonic. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
9.1 is development of framework for consideration of soil-related development applications and referrals. And we begin with a staff presentation by Andrea Antefea.
Good afternoon. I'm Andrea Antefea, and I'm a planner in electoral area planning, and I'm here this afternoon to talk to you about the development of a framework for the consideration of soil-related development applications and referrals. There's an increasing amount of large-scale soil deposits in the FERD currently, particularly on agricultural land, leading to community concerns about traffic, odors, potential air and health and water risks, and the potential to alter the natural flow of water courses, which may impact flood mitigation efforts. Soil-related applications present several challenges due to the FERD's limited and variable regulatory authority. For example, soil deposits are generally outside the scope of a zoning bylaw. The current tools and authorities available to the FERD are at best partial and insufficient for managing soil deposits effectively. As a result, these tools may fall short of the public and even potentially the board's expectations for the effective regulation of soil deposit activities. Currently in the FERD, we have 8 applications. We often see different application types that have soil deposit components, which include agricultural land commission referrals, development permits, and sometimes temporary use permits that have soil components. Currently, the FERD has 4 open files for ALC referrals, which include large-scale soil deposits stated for agricultural improvement, 3 development permit applications with soil deposits to enhance land for activities such as hay production, and 1 temporary use permit, which includes soil placement to facilitate the placement of RV storage on the property if the temporary use permit was achieved. You can see by the geographical distribution of these applications, the majority of the applications are located within electoral area F. 5 of the applications are there. We have 2 applications currently in area G and 1 application in area C. The purpose of the framework is to identify the different authorities that the FERD has that has and set out the constraints and opportunities for each application type, and to also receive direction from the board on how to best apply FERD's limited authority. The board will see soil-related proposals come forward in different ways, and the FERD's ability to influence the soil deposit varies based on the application type. For ALC referrals, the board has the discretion on whether or not to forward the application to the Agricultural Land Commission for consideration. Once the application has been forwarded to the Agricultural Land Commission for consideration, the board has no regulatory control or assurance. For development permits, there's a narrow applicability. For example, the FBRD can only address geohazard aspects or riparian values. This framework will guide staff and inform the board and public on the FBRD's role for each application type. While this framework won't give staff any new powers or resolve any of the challenges the FBRD experiences with soil-related applications and referrals, it will aim to provide consistency by establishing a standardized approach for evaluating soil-related applications, transparency by clearly communicating FBRD's regulatory authority, limitations, and responsibility to all parties, the public, board, staff, and applicants. It can define the extent that the FBRD can address public concerns, identify opportunities for sharing relevant information with other agencies, and have centralized information to ensure that all parties understand FBRD's role in reviewing soil-related applications. The recommendation today is that the board directs staff to create a structured and consistent framework for processing soil-related applications and referrals, and that staff bring the framework back for consideration at a future meeting, and further that soil-related application referrals be deferred until the framework has been considered. This would exclude development permits, as development permits are non-discretionary approval. Next steps. So if approved, staff will proceed with creating a detailed framework. This framework would be presented for consideration at a future board meeting, which aims to provide a clear structured process to handle soil-related applications in the FBRD. The consideration of specific soil-related applications would be deferred until the framework is finalized and endorsed by the board. In the meantime, staff will maintain communication and receive submissions from applicants so that during this interim period, so that after the framework had been adopted, there would be a smooth transition to process the applications. The board will also consider a soil deposit bylaw in the next year, which will provide clear regulatory authority to broadly address soil deposit activities. This is not the focus of the framework. The framework is meant to address how the FBRD can handle soil-related applications with the limited tools and authority we currently have. Thank you. And open for any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Ms. Antefev. Director Castle.
Yes, I'm just wondering, is it procedurally appropriate for us to get the motion on the table before we ask questions?
What staff think about that?
Chair Dickey, through you to Director Castle. In the past, historically, we've allowed the committee to ask questions of the presenter. However, if you're getting into debating the motion, I would recommend that you put the motion on the floor.
Okay. I have some questions that are not related to debating the motion, so I'll ask those now. The statistics around where the applications are coming from, and you alluded to that in your presentation. Is this consistent? Like, are we seeing more fill activity happening on the north side of the river than other places? And if so, do we have an idea of why that might be?
I think I can speak to what we're highlighting here is the applications we have. So in a case or a circumstance on a property where the property is located in an area that requires an application. So if they're in a development permit area, which we know the scope of development permit areas is limited. So every property within an official community plan area is part of the riparian development permit area. Geohazard development permit areas are based geographically and vary between electoral areas. So in somewhere like Area A or Area B, you may not have as many properties that are encompassed by a development permit, so you wouldn't see as many applications there. Same with agricultural land commission referrals. You don't have as many properties that are located within the agricultural land reserve lands, so there would be less applications there as well too. Traditionally, what we have been seeing is majority of the applications are coming on this side of the Fraser. We don't see a lot of inquiries or regarding properties within, say, the Canyon area or even an electoral area H or E.
So that highlights the importance of the work that we do around identifying geohazard areas then.
It gives the opportunity, and this will obviously get into more in the framework when we discuss what we're looking at, but through the geohazard development permit, while we are constrained with what we can do there, we can look at things like transfer of risk onto neighboring properties as part of that geohazard assessment.
And you mentioned in your presentation that the framework is not part of the soil deposit bylaw work, but this framework will inform that work as well, correct?
The framework will demonstrate what regulations and what authority we have currently to do and highlight what approvals are discretionary and what approvals are non-discretionary and what influence that FBRD can have in asking for additional documentation from applicants. It's not intended to be a review of the soil deposit bylaw and what can come from that. It's more to highlight to staff so we can process application to applicants what would be required and also to the committee what our role and authority is.
And I'm really happy that you bring in the discretionary and non-discretionary roles as we go through the process of some of these applications. We're learning on the fly, some of us, and very interesting to me to learn that a development permit for a large scale fill doesn't necessarily, we have no discretion on those. That my understanding is there's a checklist, and if you meet the checklist, if we tick all the boxes, you can literally put meters of fill over large swaths of land with no engagement from local government or the neighbors.
That's it. You're correct. The development permit area establishes guidelines, and as long as those guidelines are met, then the development permit would be issued.
And interesting, as looking at considering a soil deposit bylaw, that wasn't even in kind of the realm of my understanding, and I just harken back to some of our conversations, and Director Davidson was definitely onto something with regards to the desire to place fill on non-ALR lands and what our jurisdiction is over that without a soil deposit bylaw, how much more impact that has than on an ALR land where it has an ALR process.
That's right. And the framework hopes to clarify that for all parties involved, to outline what our role is and establish, that we can't work outside of that legal role and legal authority that we have.
Thank you, Director Castle. Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. So much of what I'm going to say is sort of been informed by recent discussions with staff who have had, I think, recent discussions, legal opinion coming in. So again, to reemphasize what Director Castle was pointing out, my understanding today is that if somebody's bringing in clean fill on non-ALR property, that and it's not in a development permit area, no geohazard or flood issues to be concerned with, that it's essentially unlimited as to how much fill they can bring in. And of course, that has huge impacts on characters of the community and neighbors and everything else. So from being somebody who was kind of on the fence for, do we need a soil permit, but do we need a soil deposit bylaw? My initial thoughts on it was agricultural lands, not really seeing the benefit, but for non-agricultural land, we're naked without that kind of legislation. And to that end, I guess as it relates to this framework, what I'm wondering, I've got a couple other questions as well, but what I'm wondering is that does it make sense to develop this framework concurrently with a soil deposit bylaw? I know that the motion that was approved by the board to add the soil deposit bylaw to the 2025 work plan came to pass in a atypical manner. And this committee certainly wasn't united on it. But I'm just wondering if this is an opportunity to move both things along concurrently. I know the staff report mentions that should the soil deposit bylaw move forward, the framework would need to be redone. I guess I'm also wondering about timelines for development of the framework as opposed to development cutting straight to the chase and development of a soil deposit bylaw. I know we have budget discussions coming up on that, but I'm just trying to unpack the timing of it. Does it make sense to move forward on both concurrently, assuming we had budget support to do so?
Right. So through the chair to Director Davidson, the idea would be to come back with a framework, hopefully at the next committee meeting, if not the committee meeting in January. The idea of the framework is not completing anything new, or we're not looking out of the box. We're really reading legislation, looking at our development permit guidelines, and really highlighting what we're able to do and pointing that out. So having this framework in advance of the consideration of a soil deposit bylaw really provides clarity to staff with the applications we have at hand and allows us to continue processing those in the absence of a soil deposit bylaw, instead of holding on to those applications to see what comes in the future, unknown if that soil deposit bylaw will actually become part of the work plan at this time.
Okay, thank you. So a couple other things just to the volume. You mentioned the number that's in area F, and just for the benefit of the board, there are 37 stop work orders in area F alone related to illegal fill. Presumably, as each one of these tries to work towards compliance at some point in the future, that kind of references the staff, the flow of applications that are going to be coming through the FERD one way or the other. I do have sort of questions on our role on ALC referrals. I'm still struggling to understand why they refer to us for fill that when the applicant is saying it's for agricultural purposes, but somehow it becomes a non-ALC farm use if it's been brought in without a permit ahead of time, and where our role exactly is on that. What value do we add in our referrals on something that's basically soil on agricultural land? So I'm hoping that we get some light on that as this moves forward. I did have a question on the non-discretionary development permit side of it. There's cases where, in my mind, the credibility of these applications is pretty suspect. Like, for example, one of them says that they're going to be bringing in up to 5.8 meters of fill on land that's not in the floodplain, that's well above the floodplain. And it just smells, to be honest, of a revenue opportunity for the property owner who's getting paid to take fill. They don't need, it just doesn't seem plausible to me that they would need 18 feet of fill to grow hay. So I'm just wondering, for the non-discretionary development permit process, does staff basically test this at all? Like, when an applicant says it's X amount of meters of fill for a specific purpose, do we require that the applicant demonstrate that fill is necessary to that purpose? Would be my question to staff.
Through the chair to Director Davidson. So in the case where the properties outside the agricultural land reserve, and it's only located within one of our development permit areas, we're limited to what the development permit area is trying to establish. So in the case of a geohazard, we're trying to protect the development from hazardous conditions. Or in the case of a riparian area development permit area, we're trying to protect the natural environment. And so really the scope and what we can look for these applications in is based on those reports. So the geohazard reports, which establishes that there's no hazards affecting the property, or if there are hazards, that those hazards can be mitigated within our acceptability thresholds. And also looking that there's no transfer of risk to the neighboring properties. But the guidelines and the DPAs are explicitly set out as they're mainly to address hazards affecting the property, or say someone building a single family home, not necessarily for land alteration.
So
which is
can
what-
those hazards include impact on neighborhood of related trucking activity?
Right. So currently the hazard acceptability thresholds are directly related to like a geohazard or geotechnical hazard, not related to traffic on roads or trucking on roads impacting the neighborhood.
So really the purpose of the fill isn't relevant. It's just to do with whatever hazards it may be creating. So my understanding would be is that, again, the amount of fill they can bring in is unlimited as long as it's not posing a hazard.
Right.
Essentially.
So through the chair to Director Davidson, the development permit area wouldn't contain explicit language restricting the amount of fill that was being placed on the property, more looking that the development permit area guidelines have been met, which are likely for geohazards or for riparian area values.
Okay, thank you. So my just parting comment on this would be that all this just highlights the risk we're at for non-ALR properties and fill in general, and we really need to address that risk. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Davidson. Director Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I'm honestly not really sure what my questions are. So I look at some of these and it like if somebody's adding, wanting to add fill to a depth of 5 meters. So that's that's a lot of extra fill to grow hay. And so that's the one I'm looking at right now. And so I think it's along the same lines as Director Davidson. And I know this is not the discussion about the soil fill bylaw or not, but are you suggesting that a soil fill bylaw could limit that you're only allowed to have a depth of whatever, 30 centimeters?
Right, through the chair to Director Dixon. So I'm not here to talk about the soil deposit bylaw, but at that time, the board could look at what they wanted to encompass in it and what they wanted to regulate. It could also talk about reporting structure for places that are wanting to place fill, what a reporting structure would look like on that as well.
Okay, so we won't spell. Thank you for that. I have one more then. And the checklist that you mentioned about the development permits, is that like an FVRD checklist? Is that a provincial mandatory checklist? Like, how does the checklist work?
Yeah, through the chair to Director Dixon. So with the riparian guidelines that are in the riparian development permit area, those follow provincial regulation regarding riparian area value. So our development permit area would align with the provincial regulations. In regard to the geohazard development permit, the guidelines that are within the geohazard permit would align with the protection of the property from geohazards or the protection of development. And the geohazard development permit area guidelines are basically you need a site specific, and I'm going to generally summarize because there is all different ones and they're a little bit different depending on when they've evolved in time. But essentially it's that if you have submitted a site specific report that says that the property is safe for the use intended, and that report meets EGBC, which is the Engineering and Geoscientists of BC's guidelines, and the regional district's guidelines at the time. So right now it's our geohazard assurance statement and our hazard acceptability thresholds that development permit can be issued.
One more follow-up. Okay, so because when I see this amount of fill and I'm familiar with it in my area a little bit, in some cases it may actually not be a problem at all for the person bringing in all that fill, but the rains come and the dirt all runs off, and now we have mudslides and muddy messes going on to neighbors' property as well as roads. Is that on the checklist, or can it be? Or
yeah, so one of the components of the FVRD geohazard assurance statement is that the qualified professional writing the geohazard report has to examine transfer of risk to the neighboring properties. So if the fill is being placed on the property, they would need to examine what risk that could be exacerbating onto the neighboring properties.
So you mentioned, I have another one. So you mentioned that I think that these development ones in here are non-discretionary. Does that mean they basically have to go forward right now? So as long as they have those geotech?
Yeah, so through the chair to Director Dixon, as long as the ones that are under the development permit category meet the development permit area guidelines, staff would be processing those applications.
But that's the one where they have to have a geotech saying that it's not going to cause a flood into the neighbor's yard.
Right. So through the chair to Director Dixon, part of the geohazard assessment would be to review transfer of risk to neighboring property as it would with any development on any property, as well as looking at if they're in a riparian development permit area, looking at the riparian values there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you, Director Dixon. So I've got Director Damo, followed by Castle, followed by McAhon.
Thanks very much, and thanks for your presentation. Most of it's been spoken about, except for I have a new one that's just developed over the last 5 days. They've not processed an application or anything like that, and we have been talking about it. And my concern is that we're putting a stop work order, I'm assuming likely immediately if it's not already been done today. But it doesn't seem to have any impact on anyone that will continue to do this work while we get our ducks in order and figure out where we're going to go with this. So I'm really concerned that the work is happening. The continued damage to the local residential area that's there, farming area, is going to take place. What do we have in terms of going back after this person that does it all illegally? These people have all applied for something and they're going through the process. Whether it's approved or not is not my issue. It's the ones that are doing it without application that we discover just by luck, as it turns out. So what happens now, and where do we go with that? And how quickly can we stop something before the damage is done and obtain the proper regulatory information that we require?
So through the chair to Director Animal. So depending on if the property is located in a development permit area, so that would be the one thing where we could have bylaw enforcement open and a stop work order if they're in violation of a development permit area. But if that property is not located within a development permit area, the FERD's regulatory authority is limited.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if the property that you're referring to is within a development permit area or not, but that would allow the bylaw enforcement officer to place a stop work order to determine if the property is in compliance with FERD regulations.
Thanks. Following up.
Good, thank you, Director Damo. Director McAhon.
Oh, I thought Castle. So this is similar to Director Adamos. So we had a situation in Area E where it was reported to me by some residents that somebody was bringing some dump trucks of fill into a private property. And then somebody went and asked, they said they had a permit, but I don't believe in retrospect they did. But so I guess my question is just simply, how much do they need a permit? And when do they need a permit? How much? If they bring a dump truck in, do they need a permit? If they bring 2 dump trucks in, and I've got the development piece here, but what is that?
Yep, so through the chair to Director McAhonic. So in terms of properties that are located within a development permit area, say for geohazards, any land alteration requires a development permit. Same thing for a riparian development permit area. So any land alteration within 30 meters of a water course would require a development permit or an assessment by a qualified environmental professional to determine if that 30-meter SPIA area could be reduced.
Thank you. And then once it's done and it's fairly close to the dike and it's already in there, we just report it to bylaws after that?
Get through the chair to Director McAhonic. So if you notice that someone's placing fill and you wanted to have an inquiry if the property is located in a development permit area, or if you know it is, then yeah, the reporting would go to our bylaw enforcement department and we would retroactively have that person apply for a development permit, and then they would have to go through the process to obtain a development permit. So it's a little bit different as the geohazard report be written after the fill has been placed, but we can do required condition and impact assessments. So that evaluates what's happened on the property already. And then if anything further needs to happen in order to make the property safe.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You, Director McAhonic. Director Castle.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. Thank you for your answers on this. You're doing a phenomenal job with all that's coming at you right now. I think the aha moment for me in all of this, and it sounds like maybe for some of the other committee members, is that we really have kind of 3 scenarios here, 4 actually. there's ALR lands, which we all kind of, I think, understand the process. Then there's non-ALR lands that have a development permit pro geohazard designation, where there is a checklist, a development permit needs to happen on those properties. But then there's parcels of property that aren't an ALR and aren't in a development permit area that we have limited no jurisdiction over those, and literally folks can start bringing fill in without really any engagement of local government or of the neighborhood. And in some cases, on some of these big ones, the piece of the area that they want to fill, there's a very small piece that's covered with the development permit area, but the bulk of what they're looking at, they don't need to talk to anybody. They can just start bringing trucks in. And so we're not here to debate a soil deposit bylaw, but I'm really hoping that this gives us all food for thought. And on that note, I'd like to move the recommendation.
A mover, do you have a seconder? Second, Director Dixon, any discussion on the recommendation? Seeing none, all those in favor, contrary, motion carries. Thank you again, Ms. Ante.
Thank you. Moving to item 9.2, we have zoning and official community plan amendment applications for 14770 Sylvester Road in Electoral Area F.
Promotion. Move Director Davidson, second Director Adamo. Any discussion, Director Davidson?
Thank you, Chair. Just through to staff on this one. So my question on this one was that I'm wondering if there's a little bit of a chicken and egg on some of this, because reading the report, I know that it sounds like one of the structures that have been brought in sort of contravenes zoning. There's a number of contraventions going on, but is there a potential scenario where if we're going to make resolving these matters a prerequisite to going ahead with a rezoning application, will reconciling one of these matters basically involve removing a structure that could be replaced once if the zoning got approved? So I'm just wondering if there's kind of a timing issue going on with one of the issues that are going on this property. I'm hoping that makes sense to staff.
Through the chair to Director Davidson. Sorry, I'm back. With this application, so there's 3 different structures that are highlighted in the staff report. So we have on the permitted mobile home, there was the conversion of an outdoor deck, which has been converted into a living space. That conversion hasn't fully been completed yet. There was an accessory structure that's used for storage on the property that was built without a permit. And then we have the second mobile home on the property. So our understanding is that that second mobile home is essentially an accessory personal care residence, as defined in the zoning bylaw. And so as part of the review of the building permits that will need to be submitted for these applications, it would be a review of the foundation of that mobile home, as the zoning bylaw would have provisions regarding the foundation and that it can't be a permanent foundation that mobile home is situated upon. That even with the proposal that the applicant has submitted for their zoning and official community plan amendment applications, the parcel size that would be left on this area where all of these structures are currently situated would still allow that property owner to have the primary residence as well as an accessory personal care residence in that area of the property.
So if I understand correctly, then it means that it sounds like if these things are resolved ahead of time, that you're asking for prior to considering the rezoning application. What I'm understanding is the result of the rezoning application won't change what needs to happen to the structures that are already there.
That's correct. And so the
Okay.
applicant has been notified that their property is in violation of the building bylaw because they haven't obtained building permits for these structures on their property, and
Right.
that the property should be compliant with all of the regulations currently, and that it would be advantageous for us to ask the board for a discretionary approval on their property without their property currently being in compliance. So staff recommendation was to have the board make a resolution to have the property owner bring their property into compliance before we would come back to have the consideration of any discretionary approval of their official community plan and zoning amendment.
Thank you. I'll support that motion. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Davidson. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
9.3 is temporary use permit application for the seasonal use of recreational trailers at 12041 Hodgkin Road in Electoral Area C.
Motion, move Director Wardenberg, second Director Johnson. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
9.4 is development variance permit 2023-06 to increase the maximum size of an accessory building at 52701 Parkrose Wind, Electoral Area D.
Motion, Director Dixon moves, second Director Hassel. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
9.5 is Electoral Area C official community plan update revised engagement strategy.
Move Director Wardenberg, second Director Adamo. Discussion, Director Wardenberg.
Yeah, thank you. The chair will give me a little bit of leeway. I just want to go through this process for clarity in my own mind. Once we pass this motion, we will be looking at in a mail out and some other comments. For comments, and going on to their have you say, that's pretty simple. I guess my question would be the in-person information meeting. What would be the difference in that meeting or that type of meeting than an open house, or is this all like, is that the format that you want to follow? Is this written in stone, or is this are we going to kind of tweak it as we go along?
Through the chair to Director Wardenberg. Staff's thought is that the main intent of this particular public information meeting will be to convey the results and the outcomes of the servicing feasibility strategies. And oftentimes conveying that type of technical information can be difficult in an open house setting. It would require a staff presentation and probably a distribution of information on paper and such. So our thought was that a public information meeting where there's a formal staff presentation at the beginning of the meeting with opportunities to answer questions would be the most appropriate format for the intent of this particular meeting. But we would be open to other options if there was a preference from yourself.
Okay, yeah, no, I just it's a very good thought. And interactive survey, how does that work? I'm not clear.
Through the chair to Director Wardenberg. So again, our thought is that rather than distributing kind of a static or hard copy survey, that we have something that's a little bit more interactive that provides residents and participants to interact with the information that's being presented through the survey. We have some tools available to us with our existing communication platform, Have Your Say, where we can develop a type of survey that would allow us to create more opportunities to engage with the content rather than have static kind of question answer.
Very good. Thank you for the information. And as far as the servicing feasibility, I believe in your report, the feasibility study is directed at the Harrison Rise. I guess my concern is as we get into these public open houses and notice will probably be given to everybody on it because it is an OCP issue. Is how are you going to, if it's just the feasibility is just going to be the information. Is there a feasibility study for the Harrison Mills plan, neighborhood plan?
Through the chair to Director Bordenberg. Yes, as part of the neighborhood plan that was conducted for Harrison Mills, we did undertake feasibility servicing studies to understand the feasibility of the services that are being contemplated for that neighborhood. And our intention would be to present the outcomes of those feasibility studies concurrently with those of with the studies for Harrison Rise as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you, Director Wardenberg. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries.
9.6 is the interim housing needs report for the electoral areas, and we start off with another staff presentation, but this time from Caitlin Hipwell.
Hi there. Okay, I'll round out the planning items today with another presentation, and I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. Right. So recently the province has introduced new requirements surrounding housing needs reports. These requirements create standardization around the process and methods that surround housing need report requirements. Of these requirements, local governments are required to undertake an immediate update to existing housing need reports, and this must be done by January 1st, 2025. Local governments have the opportunity to do this in one of two ways. We can undertake a full update of our housing needs report, or we can do an interim report, which has a very narrow scope prescribed within the legislation. When considering which path to take, staff considered a number of considerations, such as the introduction of this requirement to update a housing needs report was an unexpected work plan item. It was not considered within the EA planning budget originally. A full update could not be accommodated within the work plan set for 2024. And however, an interim report was a more manageable program of work that could be conducted by staff without the requirement for outside resources. Another factor that we considered was that unlike our municipal counterparts, regional districts are not required to follow up this housing need report with proactive updates to our OCPs or our zoning bylaws. As well, regardless of whether we do a full update or an interim report at this stage, all local governments will be required to undertake another regular report again by December 31st, 2028. So with that in mind, staff have proceeded with preparing an interim update. As I mentioned, the interim updates are extremely narrow in scope. It is a targeted update that has only 3 requirements that are laid out in the legislation. These requirements are provision of 5 and 20-year housing need projections, a statement on the actions that the local government has taken since the most recent housing needs report has been received in order to address housing need in that interim period, and a statement on the need for housing near active transportation infrastructure. So with these new requirements for housing needs reports, a new housing need report methodology was introduced by the province. This methodology is a standardized methodology that must be used, I should say, for calculating housing need. It is termed the H&R method. At the same time that the province introduced this H&R method, they also introduced an online calculator tool that would enable local governments to automatically generate the housing need reports required in order to satisfy the requirements of this interim report update. The method has 5 indicators that pertain specifically to regional district electoral areas. So essentially, housing needs projections must identify the supply of units to reduce extreme core housing need, to reduce homelessness, to address suppressed household formation, the units needed to meet household growth over the next 5 and 20 years, and the units needed to meet at least a 3% vacancy rate. Within this standardized H&R method for calculating housing need, there is influence of regional growth rates and projections. The H&R method itself utilizes a regional growth rate, regional homelessness rate, and a regional rental vacancy rate in order to establish the housing need projections for the electoral areas. Our impression is that this may lead to inflated projections for our electoral areas that do not necessarily align with growth as we understand it in our electoral areas, nor may it align with historical growth rates that we have typically seen in the EAs. Nevertheless, this is a method that has been created by the province and enacted in legislation and is a mandatory method for calculating housing need for housing reports going forward. So in the 2024 interim housing need report, these are the 5 and 20-year housing need projections for each of the electoral areas. So you'll see illustrated in the center column are the number of units required to meet the 5-year need, and the right-hand column are the number of units required to meet the 20-year need. It's important to keep in mind that these numbers represent approximations of future conditions. They are forecasts, and they do rely heavily on regional growth influences. That is the nature of the H&R method that has been developed by the province. These numbers are based on the best information that we have available to us at this time. And another important factor to consider when we look at these numbers, because I can imagine there's an element of surprise or wonder how we could possibly meet these projections in our electoral areas. I will say that addressing housing need does not always necessarily mean new construction. And so if we think of addressing housing need as identifying opportunities to sort of leverage the existing infrastructure that we have in our communities, where we have high rates of empty dwellings or second dwellings or dwellings being utilized as short-term rentals. These all are opportunities and ways in which we can address housing need without necessarily requiring new construction. So there is certainly a bit of interpretation and some nuance when we look at these numbers and we think about what the implications are in the electoral areas. So with that being said, the interim housing needs report does not provide this supplementary analysis. It does not go into what these numbers actually mean in the context of each electoral area. It does not provide any answers in terms of how we address this housing need, because it doesn't have to. The legislation requires that we meet those 3 requirements that I overviewed for an interim report, and that is all. That being said, the analysis component of these housing need reports are really, that's what matters. That's how we understand them. That's how we apply them. And that's how we use them as a resource in our day-to-day review of development applications and amendments to OCPs. However, at this time, staff did not have the capacity to undertake this supplementary analysis to better understand these numbers. As I said, it was an unexpected work plan item and the timelines were quite tight. The methodology was introduced by the province in July of this year, with a deadline of January 1st, 2025 to have the report received by the board. So staff recognize that a follow-up to this interim housing needs report is certainly required and necessary in order to allow for the accurate interpretation of these numbers. So what would the supplementary analysis look like? What could the committee and board expect to see in a supplementary analysis or a report that were to come later? So some examples of the types of analysis that come to mind initially for staff, and these are the types of analysis that were undertaken in 2021 when we did our initial housing needs report, would be a deeper analysis of the existing conditions in each of the electoral areas. We want to have a better understanding of, like I mentioned earlier, what types of alternatives exist to new construction that allow us to address our housing needs through, for example, better utilization of the existing housing stock that's being underutilized. are there other ways for us to alleviate housing pressures in our electoral areas without necessitating new construction? There are also, there warrants a discussion on the consistency between these housing needs report projections and our regional growth strategy. There are some inconsistencies when we see these numbers for housing projections with some of the growth management goals that are outlined in our RGS, which stipulate that development for the most part should be directed away from our rural areas and into our municipalities. And so we need to kind of reckon with this contradiction that we're seeing. Additional types of analysis would be a potential exploration of a comparative calculation methodology. So while we don't have the latitude to come up with our own way of calculating housing need, we absolutely must use the H&R method that's provided by the province. That doesn't mean that we don't have the opportunity to test out some alternatives. And that would give us the opportunity to really understand how much of an influence these regional growth rates are having on projections in our electoral areas. There's also the opportunity for staff to have further discussions with ministry staff. So our colleagues at the province will be able to give us better insight in terms of what kind of considerations were made when developing the methodology and what the thought process was around kind of implementing or imposing these regional growth rates into these rural areas of our communities and our jurisdictions. And then finally, a supplementary analysis or supplementary report would be helpful in identifying what our top priorities are and where our gaps are, areas that require further consideration that we can address in 2028 when we do a full housing needs report update. So I think what's really important to reiterate is that while we do have to receive this housing needs report in order to be consistent with the legislative requirements, we are not compelled to immediately go and amend our OCPs or our zoning bylaws to reflect these projections. Our municipal counterparts are. However, we are not. We have an opportunity to take some time to reflect on these projections, to understand what it means, what the implications are, and what alternatives we may have that we can use to address these numbers that we're seeing. So today, the recommendation before the committee would be to receive the interim housing needs report in order to meet our legislative requirement and to anticipate a future supplementary analysis from staff in the coming months to help kind of bolster our understanding around these projections. So with that, I can take any questions that the committee may have.
Good, thank you, Ms. Hipwell. Director Dowell.
Through the chair, staff, thanks very much for that presentation. I found it intriguing, to say the least. I don't have any idea how that would be possible or how it is a blanket approach to all of these 8 areas. For example, representing and speaking only on behalf of Area B, I have already surpassed the 4-year development plan and will supersede the 20-year plan in the next 24 months, with almost 300 new homes being built in an area where they're not even homes available to the public. So they, although they fulfill a segment of that area, they're not actually livable homes. They're going to be second homes for residences that have no contribution to the society's need for housing. So I just don't know how we can be forced upon us to try to comply with that and how to figure out how this is going to work. And I'm amazed at how much time you've had to put into this. And I know that there'll be plenty more time for staff to go through to try to comply. So my question is there a way to get out of this blanket approach to the HNR? Because it's simply not realistic for my area, certainly not realistic for Area A, and not for perhaps any of the other areas who don't even have the room that Diane and I have, or sorry, Director Johnson and I have.
Through the chair to Director Adamo. Yeah, I think staff shares your kind of unease with these numbers and these projections. And one thing, you know, I keep repeating myself, but it bears repeating that when we look at these numbers and we look at housing need, we ought to think of it in terms of there are opportunities beyond new construction. And so, like you mentioned in your area, there's an influx of vacation homes. And so what this additional analysis will do is it will give staff an opportunity to identify where those opportunities exist outside of requiring new construction and bring them forward for the board to consider. Currently, we do not have any regulations outside of Hemlock Valley that allow for short-term rentals, and yet they proliferate in the EAs. And so is there an opportunity to crack down on that land use in order to try to see those dwellings moved into the long-term housing market as opposed to being used as a short-term rental? So these are the kinds of questions that we're asking ourselves, and you know, we're making assumptions along the way. And what we really want to do is take the time to do that required analysis so that, you know, our reaction is no longer an assumption. It's backed up by, you know, an understanding of the data, and it allows us the opportunity to give recommendations to the board in terms of what the next steps would be or how do we go about addressing these projections.
Thanks. If I may have one follow-up. Did I miss somewhere along the way where it, or does it tell us the types of housing requirements that would be required in terms of low income, low barrier, multi-family units? Was there a number or a percentage based on each of those requirements? Did I miss that somewhere?
Through the chair to Director Adamo. That is a requirement that's laid out in the regulation for a full housing needs report update. So we can go back to our 2021 housing needs report, which will still be valid. This interim update is simply a supplement, an addendum to that existing report. And what that report does is it really breaks out housing need in terms of typology. So number of bedrooms, whether it be low barrier, what income levels we're trying to particularly attract, and that kind of thing. That's all done through that full report. This interim report is really bare bones. And my understanding of it is that it's the province's way of getting all the local governments in the province on the same update cycle using the same methodology so that comparisons across jurisdictions can be more easily done. And it will also align us in 2028 better with census updates, because right now we updated our 21 housing needs report in 2021, but the census in 2021 hadn't yet occurred at that time. And so we were using data from 2016. So there was an immediate kind of redundancy almost to the work that was being done, knowing that the data was so old. And so this new update cycle will align us well with census updates so that when we publish our new report in 2028, we'll have the most recent census data available to us at that time.
Good. Thank you, Director Adamo. Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. So a few things jump out at me from having gone through this, I think a few years ago. You know, directors, the chair and Director Dixon will recall what we went through. I don't think the other directors on this committee have been through it yet. But what struck me when we went through it before was that it really treated each electoral area like it was an island without borders to anybody. And that created a lot of challenges for me, I think, in the credibility of the numbers that were coming out. It would speak a lot to the need for having the right, for example, housing to support aging in place. Yet for my area, there is a place to call, if you want to age in place and have the right support, it's called the district admission. And the whole kind of methodology behind this just struck me as being deeply flawed. My only sort of consolation in all this was that it's not, we're not required to live to whatever we project. However, I do have sort of a fear that as we sort of crank out these reports year after year after year, that somewhere along the line at the provincial level, a switch toggles and they say, well, no, we're going to make you comply with what you've been projecting, like the other municipalities. So I'm hoping that as we report to the province on a regular basis, that we regularly and consistently articulate our challenges that we're finding with the methodologies. Otherwise, because if we don't, then those methodologies will somehow just gain credibility where I from what I've seen, they very much do lack credibility and just the results that have come out in it. I'm wondering if staff have any comments on just, can we be sending like a companion letter or something that as we report that articulates our concerns with the existing methodologies, albeit ones we're required to comply with?
Through the chair to Director Davidson. Thanks for those comments. Yeah, I think staff recognizes too that the process surrounding housing needs report really does have an urban focus and can't be easily or practically applied to rural areas. And yet here we are legislatively required to do so. And so we share that same level of concern. We recognize that there may be opportunities for staff to have conversations at the staff level with ministry staff and the planning and land use management branch. But if there were an interest from the committee in kind of escalating those concerns, perhaps that could be accommodated at the board level, but that would be a conversation to have, I think, with Ms. Kinnaman.
Good. Thank you, Director Davidson. Perhaps we'll let this discussion evolve a little further. Director Castle.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. Planning is knocking it out of the park today. Way to go. Great presentation. Answers are phenomenal. Question through the chair to the presenter. Are First Nations included in this? What impacts does First Nations have in this? I know sometimes First Nations numbers are included in the work, and sometimes they're not. So in these numbers that were presented, are First Nations included? And what impact does development on First Nations in Area G? That's where the development's going to occur, and it's going to occur substantially. How are First Nations in the mix here?
Thank you for that. So through the chair to Director Castle, the housing projections that you see in the interim report pertain only to the lands within the FERD's jurisdiction. So it does not include projections for First Nations lands. In our 2021 housing needs report, we did do significant engagement, or I say significant lightly, I guess. It was in the middle of COVID. So as we were able to, and as nations had capacity, we engaged with them in terms of what their needs were. And you'll see highlighted in a number of instances within the 2021 housing needs report, specific needs that are unique to the Indigenous communities in our EAs. And so we spoke to that as much as we could in the 2021 report. This interim report really is bare bones. There is no public consultation component to accompany this, so we have not done any of that work at this juncture. But I imagine that that would be included again in 2028 when we do a full report update.
Yeah, thank you for that. And from what we're hearing from some of our First Nations leaders, their plans will knock these numbers out of the park. So interesting consideration there. And just I really look forward to the report with the contextual analysis, because it was a very difficult report to digest. These numbers guide our planning. How do they influence our decisions? Or how what are the implications of these numbers when we have applications before us?
Through the chair to Director Castle, excellent questions, and I'm glad to know that you're kind of thinking what the next step is. So that's really where the supplementary analysis will come in, and it will really help us to understand exactly what the implications are in terms of our assessment of development applications and our review of OCPs as we undertake them. But in terms of our legislative requirements, OCPs, when we do update them, we're on no fixed time frame to do so. But when we do undertake an OCP update, we are required to consider the housing needs report and accommodate the housing projections within the OCP through land use designations and mapping. So we do have a responsibility to show that we can meet these projections in our OCPs when we do update them.
Thank you, Director Castle, Director Dixon, and then Wardenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for your report and all the information. Just a little bit of a follow-up with the First Nations. So my question would be, and I see so the First Nations are doing a lot of building that are not, I'm pretty sure, not just for First Nations people, it's for other people living in Chilliwack that want to live in one of the homes they're building. And so I guess I would like some clarification, or maybe even just I think that's an important piece of information to make sure that the province is continually aware of, and maybe they are. A couple other conversations I've had were where nobody was sure whether they were counting those as anybody's housing projections. And I think my area, there's not a lot of land, but there is certainly some First Nations land, and down the road that might be something that could ease some of the housing. So I just hope that message continues to get forward, and maybe in a little clarification. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Dixon. Director Wardenberg.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the presentation. Yeah, it leaves a lot to be desired as far as my understanding of this, for sure. I guess my question would be, as far as timelines go, as far as this report and how it would be reflected into the OCP of Area C, and what are priorities of the planning staff on this and in their next year's work plan.
Sure. Through the chair to Director Wardenberg. Yeah, the timing of the Area C OCP update will dovetail with receiving this interim housing needs report. And so when we are at the stage of the OCP where we need to demonstrate that we have considered our housing needs report, it will be consideration of the projections contained within the interim housing needs report. So it will have a sort of an immediate impact on how we consider the Area C OCP.
Good. Thank you, Director Wardenberg. Director Davidson, and then maybe we better move on. Pardon me? Director Davidson.
Thank you. So something that was said just flashed for me was the need to incorporate housing needs report into future OCPs. I just wanted to pick a little bit at that incorporation. For example, is a future OCP required to align with the housing needs report, or just required to speak to it? For example, could it have language in there that said, you know, HNR is forecasting this, however, the methodology may not apply, so we're doing something else instead? Or are we required in future OCPs to align with whatever the last HNR produced?
Through the chair to Director Davidson. So the language in the Local Government Act is quite precise. A local government must consider the most recent housing needs report and must provide for at least the 20-year total number of housing units in the OCP. And this is again where I would repeat myself in saying that providing for the 20-year total number of housing units may not necessarily have to be through new construction. There may be opportunities within the OCP to identify policies that would address housing need in alternative ways, depending on the specific context of that electoral area.
I guess what I'm hearing though is that while we may say that the HNR today is, you know, the methodology is prescribed, however, we're not obligated to basically incorporate it into anything. The next time we do an OCP, then it's got its backdoor entry into it, and it basically does become a requirement, as opposed to it doesn't inform the OCP. It basically sets requirements for the OCP. That's my understanding from what you're saying. Is that accurate? That the housing needs reports actually sets requirements that a future OCP must address?
Through the chair to Director Davidson. Yeah, I think that is a fair characterization. The intention is that housing need reports inform our understanding of what the housing need is in any given area, and how we address housing need predominantly would be through our OCPs. So they are two separate tools that at some point do have to converge.
But at some point, if we feel the methodology that went into a housing needs report was inappropriate to our area, is the reality simply, well, that's just too bad, you have to accommodate it anyway in a future OCP? Or do we have the ability to go a different route in a future OCP than what the housing needs reports suggest, because we're not, the methodology for the H&R just wasn't appropriate to our circumstance?
Through the chair to Director Davidson. The FERD does not have meaningful latitude to adjust these projections. So they have been calculated using the methodology that has been prescribed by the province, and we do not have an opportunity to meaningfully tweak these numbers to suit what we may deem an individual context.
I'm not suggesting that we tweak the numbers. I'm suggesting that, do we have the latitude to disagree with them and say, while the housing needs report says this, we're going to do something different because of concerns with the housing needs report's methodology? Or in a future OCP, are we bound to follow whatever the HNR methodology, good or bad, produces?
Through the chair to Director Davidson, we have a legislative requirement to include housing needs report projections in our OCPs when we undertake OCP updates.
But I guess my question is our OCP updates, we can include them, we can report on them. Are we required to accommodate them?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Davidson. So I see these directives come through from the province and sometimes think that they're actually focusing on the municipalities, and we're getting sideswiped, and wonder if you've spoken with ministry staff informally, and there might be some indication that they cut us some slack. No?
At this point, no, staff haven't had those types of conversations with ministry staff. Up to this point, our conversations have been purely technical and trying to deal with some anomalies that we had to deal with in terms of doing our calculations to meet this imminent need for an update. But as part of the supplementary analysis that I pointed out, I think there is certainly an opportunity for us to start embarking on those conversations with our colleagues at the province.
Good. Thank you. Very nice report and very nice responses to some difficult questions. Thank you, Caitlin. On the motion, Director Davidson, once again.
My apologies, everyone. It just sort of, the penny just sort of dropped for me. Like for the longest time, I've been hoping we can get another OCP review cycle happening for my area. Now I'm just sort of thinking it's a risk. There's now an advantage in never redoing your OCP again, so that you can avoid basically providing a backdoor to HNR, which is done on a methodology which is, from what I've seen, at least in Area F, just not sensible. But becomes binding somewhere further down the road in a future OCP. Anyway, I just wanted to share that. Thank you, Chair. My apologies.
Good. Thank you, Director Davidson. On the question, on the recommendation, all those in favor? Contrary?
Chair Dickey, we actually didn't have a mover and a seconder,
Oh,
so I think Director
you.
Castle was trying to move it.
Motion moved, Director Castle, second, Director Wardenberg. Any discussion further? Hearing none. All those in favor, contrary, motion carries. Thank you for straightening me out.
Thank you, no worries. So moving right along, we're on to 10.1.1, which is the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund Fire Department's equipment and training. There is a motion for your consideration.
Ooh, Director Wardenberg, second, Director Adamo. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, contrary, motion carries.
10.2.1 is the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund Evacuation Route Grant.
Motion, Director Makahonic, second, Director Dixon. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, contrary, motion carries.
10.2.2 is the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund Evacuee Support Services Grant.
Motion, Director Dixon, second Director Johnson. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, contrary, motion carries.
And 10.2.3, the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund Emergency Operations Center Grant.
Motion, Director Makahonic, second Director Castle. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, contrary, motion carries.
Item 12.1, we have the quarterly update. It's an information item. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Director Castle.
A comment and a question. 919 active bylaw files. How many staff are working on those 919 bylaw files?
I think we'll turn that one over to Mr. Danilus.
Stumbling over that 919 number, but we have 2 bylaw officers, 2 full-time bylaw officers, and a 0.8 FTE clerk that work in our bylaw team.
Thank you, Director Castle. Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. A couple things. It's unusual to see the second and third quarter update combined into a single one. I'm curious if staff can shed some light on what's
Sure.
up.
Through the chair to Director Davidson, we've had some staffing challenges throughout 2024, and we were unable to provide a second quarter update on time.
Thank you. The other question I have is on the section bylaw, again, the 919 active bylaw files. It'd be useful to know for future reporting, is this up or down from the last report? You know, are we winning the war or losing it, in other words? And from the way this report is structured, I don't really get a sense of how the trends are going. So
through the chair to Director Davidson, I'm going to actually ask staff to double check that number. I'm concerned that perhaps it was an addition error in that line. So we will do a review of that and bring it back to the full board to make sure that it's on target.
The other on the bylaw side would be useful to know would be how many files have been closed. And I think a lot of this dovetails into our process where we'll I've forgotten the name of the process again, when we do a notice on title, that there's an active bylaw complaint, and then we take no further action. So, you know, if a lot of these things are just getting to that stage and never getting resolved, I think it'd be a useful statistic to know. If we could be including basically the number of files that actually get closed as well would be helpful. I don't know if any get closed, to be honest, but thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Davidson. I will turn things back to Ms. Kim.
So moving down to reports by electoral area directors.
Director Castle would like to start.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. Just a couple of comments. The invasive species in Hatzic Lake, the weeds growing in Hatzic Lake, we've been receiving correspondence from residents in the area all summer long, and I had an opportunity to meet with a resident from Hatzic Island last week. There's a strong desire amongst the residents in that area to see the invasive species in the lake addressed. And I was pleased to advise that, of course, we have included consideration of a service area to address this as part of our 2025 plan, or at least it's in the proposed plan. And I also attended, because I don't have enough to do, I attended the AGM of the Fraser Valley Invasive Species Society. And sure enough, Hatzic Lake was a major topic in the presentation. So happy to see that consideration of a service area for that to proceed, as well as it seems that there's a desire at the resident level to raise some money and see what they can do themselves to get out there and start getting rid of some of those weeds. So so that is definitely on top of mind in Area G. Also very appreciative of the work that staff are doing around the framework on fill sites. I had a number of residents in the last couple of weeks connecting with me, very, very concerned, especially in the Dudney area, about some of these large scale fill projects that are proposed. So that's what's on the minds of Area G residents this month. And just want to invite everyone out to the Dudney Elementary School Christmas Market that is happening this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Dudney Elementary School. Come and check out the local vendors and artisans and support the students of Dudney Elementary School. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Castle. Director McElhone.
Thank you, Director Dickey. So I was able to attend and lay a wreath at the Stalo Remembrance Day event, and it was very moving. And Stephen Point, his words were, I think, really apt for the times that we're in and all the different changes we're having politically, on the bigger scale and smaller scale. So I was really glad that I attended. And I had the opportunity to meet our new MLA, Alaya Warbus, and she happens to be Stephen Point's daughter. So I was able to talk to both of them for some time. So, and I talked to her about in person about the residents that are struggling with the 2021 Atmospheric River event, and she will be sending her assistant to the event, and she is going to be meeting with the residents. So just really trying to advocate for that. And as I mentioned earlier today, we have our event to support the Valley in the Rally fundraiser on November 23rd. And we have good music. We have our famous MC, Director Castle. And we're really looking forward to bringing awareness and bringing people together to have some fun and to really let these folks know that they're supported. Lots of prizes and good music. So if you can make it, I need to know by the end of the day because tickets are selling out. We're pretty much topped up. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Director McElhone. Director Dixon.
Sorry, we were busy planning here to attend your event. Area H, I too was able to attend a Remembrance Day ceremony at the Vetter Crossing at the cenotaph there. Good speakers. It was just a really a moving ceremony, and it's so good to see so much support out for that to honor those who have helped us keep our freedom. Christmas in Cultus Lake, November 23rd, 4 till 8. Anybody wants to come up to Cultus Lake Main Beach, we're having lighting and Santa Claus and hot chocolate and various vendors and things like that. It should be fun. Is able to attend the Columbia Valley Ratepayers AGM on November 2nd, and they're just doing a lot of work for the area and still really working at building community and keeping the hall open and doing a great job. As well as I attend class monthly, and that's the Cultus Lake Aquatic Society, and they have great speakers all the time, and just do a lot of work to protect the Cultus Lake watershed. So those meetings are the fourth Wednesday of every month, and there's an online link just on class. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Dixon. Director Wardenberg.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I had the pleasure to attend the Remembrance Day ceremony in Agassiz. That was a very moving event. Try to do it every year. And just to let everybody know that the Eagles have returned to Harrison Mills. It's quite the sight. If anybody gets a chance to go to the Harrison Mills Sandpiper Golf Course, there's some viewing areas there. Yeah, their numbers are in the thousands, I would say, and getting larger, with an excellent record-breaking salmon run this year. And of course, good news for Sasquatch Mountain as the snow is flying up there, or at least the remnants up top, at the very top anyway. And I hope they have a great year. And that's it for me.
All is positive. Thank you, Director Wardenberg. Director Adamo.
Thanks very much. Just wanted to thank Everyone that participated in the Holiday Trail Sunshine Valley Volunteer Fire Department Halloween Haunted House this year. They raised a lot of money for local charities and did a great job once again and are already planning for next year's event. The Yale Christmas Market is taking place at the Yale Community Center on December the 1st. It's an all-day event. It's a Sunday this year with local artisans and other people from around. And I also was privileged and honored to participate in this year's Remembrance Day celebration in Hope with Mayor Smith and our newly elected MLA MLA Luck. We got a chance to spend a few hours together that day discussing things up and coming and the future of the area. And was really honored to meet one of our veterans that still lives in Hope with his wife, veteran George Bonney of the Korean War. He told some amazing stories and a remarkable man that I've known for a number of years. So I was very happy to participate with him and his family and see everyone there as well. And also attended the Sunshine Valley Volunteer Fire Department's AGM. And they've got a brand new board and a new direction and a new chief. So things are very exciting for the community there. So everyone is on track for the future. So thanks very much.
Good. Thank you, Director Donald. Director Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. So Remembrance Day was the ceremony was held at the North Bend Hall. And it was really well attended this year. And the organizers certainly did a fantastic job. At the end of the ceremony, they did provide a bit of time for open mics. So there were some stories shared that were really, really interesting. And there was a young engineer that was staying at the bunkhouse actually, and he wandered up to the hall. And so he shared a story about his grandfather. And I'll be attending the landfill AGM on November 16th. November 19th, I'm really looking forward to the library tour in Boston Bar along with some of the other directors here. And November 27th, Community Futures is coming to the North Bend Hall to do to hold an information session for our community. So looking forward to that.
Good. Thank you, Director Johnson. Director Davidson.
So as always, illegal fill is top of mind. One of the sites that has huge amounts of illegal dumping going on, they'd removed the equipment, but then the equipment was back, and local residents saw them not bringing more fill in, but just moving the existing fill around a bit. When challenged, they basically got out of town quite quickly. So still no sign of any kind of remediation of the existing illegal fill, and I have no idea if that's ever going to happen or it's going to take years to happen. So yeah, it's really where community thoughts are these days. I think our takeaway is that our best defense, frankly, is community awareness. No government agency is able to get in there in a timely way. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Davidson. And I have nothing to report myself, so I will turn things back to Ms. Kim.
Thank you. So now we move to public question period for items relevant to the agenda, and we'll just turn it over to our Deputy Corporate Officer, Lauren Olenek.
Thank you. We do have one member of the public joining us online today, so this would be your opportunity to ask a question relevant to an item on the agenda. And I'll just ask you to hit the raise hand function if you have a question. And while we give them a minute, I will note we have not received any written correspondence. And it appears there's no questions.
Good. Thank you.
So looking for a resolution to close the meeting?
Move, Director Dixon, second, Director Damo. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Contrary? Motion carries.
Okay, we'll just take a short recess so we can set up the room.